This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Detroit is the greatest!
Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Darren McCarty comes back to Neiman in front of him. McCarty draws. McCarty in. McCarty scores! A magnificent goal! Darren McCarty!
Stafford takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Motor City Sports Rant. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Thanks, everybody, for another great week of podcasting. I can't wait to break down the NFL draft with Jason Jarvie. He'll call in shortly. What an unbelievable week in Detroit sports. You had the first playoff game at Little Caesars Arena. Me and Jason will break that down. You have Steve Yzerman, arguably one of the greatest Detroit Red Wings of all time. He gets named to be the general manager on 4/19/2019, and everybody that's a fan of the Red Wings is super excited. We have to talk about it. It's a great time to be a fan of Detroit sports. The Tigers, at the time of this recording, they're sitting at 10 wins, 10 losses, playing a decent brand of baseball. Daniel Norris had a great performance in his first start in a long time, got his first win in a couple seasons. I love doing this podcast. I want to thank everybody that has downloaded, that has supported the cause, that has reached out and messaged us via our Twitter platform at Detroit Podcast. It just makes the podcast that much more fun to engage. And this is the biggest week. We're going to start the podcast talking about the Detroit Lions and where are they going to end up? Are they actually going to draft number 8? Are they going to move back? Bob Quinn has been forthright. He's come out and said, look, if there's a possible trade that allows us to acquire more picks, we're going to take advantage of it. And so I am prone to believe a guy like Bob Quinn in that he has really, in the end, at this point in time, nothing to lie about to the fans because most of the fans realize that there are a lot of holes on this Detroit Lions roster and they have to upgrade at a lot of positions. So whether they take an offensive lineman, whether they take a linebacker, maybe address some help in the secondary. The one pick, though, that if they do make it, probably will piss me off is the TJ Hockenson pick. Many people now this week, when they're finalizing their mock drafts, they're doing their last one. They're putting it out there on various platforms. They're putting it out there on their websites, on their articles and their columns across the NFL and locally. A lot more people are willing to put TJ Hawkinson's name as the one that the Detroit Lions will select. If they select a tight end at number 8, I just think that a lot of people will be really upset if that's the name that's called. I don't see a scenario in which the Detroit Lions actually make that move because they can go out there and they can make that move later in the draft. So barring the Detroit Lions going up there and giving the card to Roger Goodell and the name being TJ Hockenson, I think I'm going to be okay. A lot of the names that we're hearing, I think, will help the Detroit Lions. And Jason Jarvie, welcome in, sir. Thank you for joining the conversation. I just said, look, to open the podcast, it's a big week for the Lions. It's the draft week. Barring the drafting of a tight end, I think I'm going to be okay with whatever name is called, and I think there's a strong chance the Detroit Lions don't even draft at 8. They're going to move back.
So I wish I could really agree with you, but the way I'm feeling about this draft right now is I'm not really going to be surprised with whatever they do. Like, I'm not sure if I can if there's really a player that I'm going to be like, oh my God, this is the worst move ever, unless it's like some random guy who really didn't grade out and didn't belong in the first round. But, you know, if number 8 rolls around and the Lions select tight end TJ Hockenson, I can't criticize. I can't kill them for it. Now, logic would say they can't do this because they picked Eric Ebron. But the Eric Ebron pick made 0 sense for that team at that time. And Eric Ebron had no business. He wasn't even talked about where the Lions picked him. They picked him at 10, correct?
Yes, they picked him at 10th, famously ahead of guys that would have been massively more productive, obviously.
But this guy TJ Hockenson, they are talking about him as a first-round product. And it is conceivable he could go somewhere around the 8 to 12 mark. So no, I'm not saying that it would be my favorite pick, but I'm also saying there's not really a pick that I'm just super in love with, because really all I want is for whoever we take at that number 8 spot is to come in and produce right away. And if TJ Hawkinson actually can come in and provide a position of need and some consistency at a position that we haven't had in a very long time, I wouldn't be completely upset with it.
Now, we want to be fair and balanced here on the podcast. That's what I want to be known for. We welcome all opinions. Now, the case for TJ Hawkinson and for the Detroit Lions to get an elite tight end is they just look back to the 2018 season. Matthew Stafford, obviously, the organization decided that, you know what, we're going to de-emphasize tight end. We're going to try to go out there and just fill that position. We're going to let Eric Ebron leave, and we're going to try and make the tight end position a little bit not so much the emphasis or the focal point of that offense. And you realize, okay, Matthew Stafford, without a tight end, without a security blanket, went out there, and there were other reasons as well, but his numbers were among the worst of his career. So many people are saying, you know what, the organization was wrong by just letting Eric Ebron go, a guy that could have been productive if Stafford would have utilized him properly, if he would have been a red zone target and maybe not a guy that was called upon to make plays on 3rd and 8 and things like that, but just utilize him similarly to how Andrew Luck and the Colts utilized him, a guy that can get into the end zone, that can create matchup nightmares, and that can be a highly productive guy that has few catches, but the majority of them are of the touchdown variety. Do you see that?
It doesn't help that last year, Stafford got killed because you lose Golden Tate at the trade deadline, you lose Marvin Jones 2 weeks after that, so he had nobody to throw to. When Ebron was here, he really wasn't he was essentially the number 1 or number 2 target in Indianapolis last year. Whereas when Ebron was here, you still had Calvin Johnson, who was arguably one of the best wide receivers in the league at that time, and then you also put Golden Tate on that team.
Yeah, and then you realize, okay, the people that are willing to mock TJ to the Detroit Lions are also saying, look, the New England Patriots, when they had their early run, they had a dual threat combination of Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski, and now they're trying to parlay that to say, you know what, Jesse James fits a bill and serves a role. If you go out there and solidify the tight end spot and get a guy that could be a superstar a la Rob Gronkowski, then you shore that up, and you also really help out Matthew Stafford, and you surround him with better talent. But wouldn't you argue, though, okay, if you want to get a tight end, no problem. Wouldn't you argue, though, that you can get the other tight end that might even fit better into the scheme that is being run by Darrell Bevell? A lot of people are talking up TJ Hawkinson's backup, Noah Fant, as a guy that could also do the job and might even grade out a little bit higher in terms of what he could produce in his career.
So I think Noah Fant is a guy who athletically he may be better than TJ Hawkinson, but I think it all really depends on what you see in Darrell Bevell's offense. I mean, if we're going to continue to be a passing attack offense, then yeah, you probably would want to look at trying to trade down. And if you are really in love with a tight end, then yeah, look at Noah Fant. But TJ Hawkinson brings a little bit more in the run blocking game, and that he can actually provide a solid, run blocking in the run game, which that's what we've all been hearing that they want to do. They want to run the ball. They got Kerryon Johnson. They just signed C.J. Anderson. So I don't think you bring a guy like C.J. Anderson in here and not try to run the ball more. So I think if you're arguing for the tight end, I think you'd want to go for a guy who can be a complete package and can also be a really consistent receiver. But I think there are so many positions that you could try and fill here, and there's players they're going to be there, but I think all those players also just come with a bunch of question marks.
Now, did you get a chance to listen to Bob Quinn in his pre-draft presser and what he was saying in regards to not ever wanting to draft in the top 10 again, that he is actually willing to take phone calls to move back and acquire more picks? Are you willing to maybe sacrifice a couple later round picks, like let's say, for example, maybe a 3rd round pick, maybe not to move down, but are you willing to sacrifice later round picks? Let's say, for example, there's a player that they really value and move up to 6 or 5 and get the guy that they think can no doubt be an impact player. Would you be willing to gamble and move up? Because obviously the safe play is to get more picks, But if you want to roll the dice a little bit, if there's somebody at 4, 5 that you think, you know what, no matter what, when we say his name, when we make him a Detroit Lion, when we ink him to a deal that's going to make him super rich, that we put him in the Detroit Lion culture, that no matter what, we think he'll contribute on Sundays in this super important season, starting right away with Arizona. I think they could do it, but I think the odds are in favor of the Detroit Lions actually trading back this year.
Yeah, and I think if it's going to be a trade, it's going to be a trade down. They're going to be going back trying to get more picks because – honestly, the one guy that I look at the top of the draft who I would consider giving up, our draft picks to try and take would be Nick Bosa. I think that's the one guy who I think he's going to come in day one and he's going to be an impact player. I think the rest of the guys, I think it's going to take some time. You're looking at the quarterbacks, you're looking at and the Quinnen Williams. So I'm not sure what those guys are going to do right from the get-go. And I think you can have to trade up to number 2 to get Nick Bosa. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, a lot of people are really kind of intrigued by what's going on. It's a really fascinating time, too. People are kind of noticing, okay, there's so much false information that literally, Jason, I've read like 50 mock drafts, and about, the majority of them have all different names with the Detroit Lions in their top 10. There's so much information. There's so many ways to do the mock draft. It's fascinating. It's quite the fascinating look because everybody knows factually that these general managers are going to the media, giving wrong information so that it's leaked, that mock drafts in their 5th and 6th versions will be, in essence, wrong. And these guys, I think their boards are pretty much set. They've played out different scenarios, and they roughly have an idea in the top 10 how things are going to shake out based on needs, and you can play out scenarios in your workday. So it's an interesting age. Are there a couple mock drafts that you fell in love with or were like, oh, man, this is really good? Or do you say to yourself, you know what? The majority of them are similar. There's just one or two that you lock into every year.
There isn't really any one mock draft I fell in love with because there's no guy that I love at number 8. I whoever we get, it's going to be an interesting pick. And really the big question is going to be the number 1 pick. And is Arizona going to stick with it or who are they going to trade it? And Kyler Murray he's going to be the big question of he's the steal of the draft. I think this is a guy who could be just like Baker Mayfield last year, how he's changed the culture in Cleveland. He could change the culture somewhere, but you never know what's going to happen. Is Arizona going to make a deal where they draft their quarterback of the future the year before, get the number 1 pick this year, and draft their next quarterback of the future in Kyler Murray, and end up dealing Josh Rosen somewhere? So that's going to be the interesting part. And then everything after that, I think it's going to be Nick Bosa. It's going to be the Williams kid from Alabama, and he'll get to number 8, and then whoever is best on the board, that's the line they need to take.
NBCSports.com is the one I fell on just now. I just typed in NFL mock draft, and I wanted to see which one popped up first. So NBCSports.com has the Detroit Lions selecting 8th. Detroit Lions select T.J. Hockenson. Number 9, they have the Bills taking Ed Oliver. Number 10, they have the Denver Broncos taking Drew Lock. At number 11, they got the Bengals holding off and not making a trade, and they see Dwayne Haskins falling to number 11. And number 12, let's see, 11, Dwayne Haskins. 12, Green Bay Packers take Devin Bush. So they got Rashawn Gary going 6th in this mock draft. So any of those players, 9 through 12, that if the Lions don't take, could be the guy that everyone goes, holy shit, man, we missed out. Could it be Devin Bush? Could it be Ed Oliver? Is one of those quarterbacks going to come back and bite us in the ass? Because that's what everyone does. Whoever the Lions take, we're going to look at the next 4 to 5 picks. The Dolphins in this mock draft are going to take Montez Sweat. I feel like that's the name that, if he slips those couple spots, might be the guy at defensive end that could be a guy that bites you in the ass if T.J. Hockenson doesn't live up to the hype.
Yeah, those are the 2 names that I keep seeing, that I've seen a lot, are Montez Sweat and Rashawn Gary. And while I think they're both good picks and they really have potential to be impact players in the NFL, I think they also come with some big question marks. Montez Sweat has the heart issue. That always scares me because I feel like that could your career could be done at any point. And similar with Rashawn Gary, we've seen him up close and personal playing in Michigan the past 2 years. We know what he is and what he can do, and we also know that he is very much injury prone. So that's my big concern. Is I want a guy who I know is going to be playing for my team for the next 6 to 10 years, and I don't want to draft a guy who is going to play 10 to 12 games every year and then be sidelined with a hamstring injury, similar to what we got from Ezekiel Ansah.
So you saw the schedule release. We had a good time with it. You are a little bit more in favor going up into the 9-10 win range. A lot of people, Jason, when we look at that schedule, obviously we're going to, reserve our lockdown schedule game predictions until a couple weeks from now when we see how the overall draft shook out. But a lot of people don't have the Lions winning more than 7 or 8 games. That start, Jason, looks brutal where, in essence, game 1, Arizona, who will be arriving into the season with the number 1 pick, maybe with a new quarterback, maybe the Detroit Lions will feast on him as opposed to what they did last year versus the Jets, where they weren't able to, at home in a primetime game, take it down. Maybe on the road, they'll pin their ears back and make Kyler Murray's life a nightmare if he is the starter. But in essence, game 1, Arizona, it's a must-win because you're staring at 0-5 right in the face. That first month of football, oh my God, you look at the schedule, they're going to have to really pin their ears back and get some W's because it's pretty tough. I mean, it does, even out a little bit towards the middle of the season, but there's no guarantee you're going to beat the Bears, Packers, and Vikings this year. And it could go south just as easily as the Lions fulfilling your prediction of 9 or 10 wins.
And when I said 9 or 10 wins, that's optimistic. That's looking at the schedule and saying, you know what, there are teams that we can beat here. And that's how you have to go into an NFL season, that, you're going to win some games against better teams. And you know what, there's probably going to be a game here and there that you poop the bed on. And I know everyone's been looking at this the beginning of the season, and they get really scared about it. And honestly, I don't see 0-5. I don't think the Cardinals, I think they're still going to be struggling. The Chargers are a good team. I think that's probably a loss. I think people give way too much credit to the Philadelphia Eagles because, Carson Wentz, what is he going to be coming off of his injury? Yeah, I know that the Chiefs, they're probably going to beat us. No doubt about that. And the Packers, the Packers aren't invincible anymore, honestly, to me. So, yeah, realistically, I think it's easy to say that the Lions are going to win 7 or 8 games this year. That's the baseline. But when I look at the schedule and what I want to expect from my Lions, I want to expect that they're going to win 9 to 10 games, and I see the possibilities there.
Oh, Jason, I always love it when he comes out. I love it when the schedule comes out. Jason's always above 8 wins, never going with 7-9, 8-8 like me every single year. He's like in our chat rooms. He's like, I think there's a chance. I think there's a chance. There's some optimism. The Lions could draft well. They could get their tight end, and that could be the difference. We'll see.
And when they completely crap the bed and we're sitting at 0-5, I will own up to my mistake because that's what the Lions have done to us every single season, that they're just so disappointing. I mean, last year, Matt Stafford lost all credibility for me. So
yeah, it's tough.
And that's what it is about being a fan. You're able to change your opinion.
Oh yeah, you know it. Every single week we were like, all right, Lions in the playoffs. Lions should be firing everybody. That's what makes this podcast fun, is we can debrief, we can laugh, we can share the pain with the fans and engage the audience. It's great, and that's why we do this. That's why I love talking to you each and every week or whenever we have the opportunity. Now, before we talk about the best news in Detroit sports and probably the history of the podcast, I want to thank a couple sponsors who make this possible, who help keep the lights on and the microphones hot here in the studios. I want to thank the Motor City Pawnbrokers, 4 locations in Metro Detroit. They're reshaping how pawn shops are viewed. They're known for great customer service, don't pay full price. Go check out the Motor City Pawnbrokers. There's 4 locations in Roseville, Warren, Detroit, and Ferndale. MotorCityPawnbrokers.com, a great sponsor of the network. And one of the newer sponsors is the Flick app. Now, Jason, the best part of this podcast is the fact that we can engage our audience via Twitter. We can engage them via our various platforms on Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook. But now there's a new organized way where in-game we can carry on the conversation from this podcast. Like if you agree or disagree, if you have a name that the Detroit Lions absolutely have to take, or there's a name that they cannot take, go over to the Flick app, download it. And if you're a supporter of the network, you'll see on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast a special invite link that you just click on, download the app, and boom, you're in the group. And you can mix it up with Jason. We'll be live chatting during games. We'll have special guests and contests for those that are exclusively in the group. It's exclusive, so it's invite only. So if you want to be part of a growing chat community, definitely go check out the Flick app. It's invite only at this time, and you can get the invite link on our Twitter page and various social media platforms at Detroit Podcast, or just search Detroit Sports Podcast anywhere on social media, and you'll be able to find your way into Detroit Sports' newest chat headquarters. All right, Jason, 4/19 was a great day. It was Friday. I'll remember it specifically because my ass was in bed. I was sleeping. I kind of woke up around like 8:05, 8:10 normally with the girls because that's when they wake up. They need their breakfast, and I get to spend an hour with them before they go to school. And the first thing I see is Steve Yzerman has been named the general manager of the Red Wings. I'm like, wait a minute, 4/19. Holy shit. Yes, they did it. And I got the announcement, and it's like, okay, 3 o'clock, there's a presser. I'm like, yes, they locked it down. They fooled everybody. They had the deal in place. They had the announcement. It was kind of like, you know, when you're starving for any positive news and you get the news that maybe the guy that can turn things around for the Red Wings has just been hired, a guy that's an unsung hero, a guy that we all grew up in Detroit that watch sports or hockey. We all know Steve Yzerman and his come up and going through all the setbacks and the early round exits and the injuries that he had, the fact that Scotty Bowman wanted to trade his ass, and now he goes off, he does it the right way, he learns under Ken Holland, he takes another job, he takes a dormant franchise in Tampa Bay, he makes them into something, even though, you know, they had a really atrocious exit this year. But Steve Yzerman, after he decided last year that, you know what, I'm not going to renew my contract, I'm going to step down as GM of Tampa Bay, it was inevitable. Everybody knew, you know, that report from New York was crazy. I think that maybe that could have been some leveraging opportunity, maybe to get a couple extra dollars. But in the end, doesn't matter. However the story played out, I know people wanted to know the timeline, and that was brought up in the presser. It doesn't matter. Signed, sealed, delivered. Steve Yzerman came home, and it was a great day. Friday probably was one of the more positive days in the history of the podcast, the history of our Twitter page, and in Detroit sports, a really great presser to be at because of the fact that, hey, Steve Yzerman has an aura, and many people believe that finally a general manager is in place right now in Detroit that we think can lead actually the franchise in the right direction.
Absolutely. This when I saw the news, it's been, I feel like it's been coming, and it's been something that we've needed these past couple of years. And finally, the Red Wings deliver. There's going to be positivity, but I do appreciate Steve Yzerman coming up on that podium and being real about it. That you have to temper your expectations coming into this. That it's going to be some growing pains, and that it's not going to be just you flip the switch and we're competing for Stanley Cups again. And that's what fans need to know. And they need to give him time, because I do believe that Steve Yzerman, he is a much better general manager than Ken Holland. He may have learned from Ken Holland, but from what he's done in Tampa Bay and also with Canada Hockey, that he's built teams and he knows what to do. He knows how to make those tough decisions. You know, he cut 2 captains on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Cut LeCavalier and Martin St. Louis. Those guys were fan favorites, but those were the right moves for that team and to get them to where they are today. They didn't win a Stanley Cup, and clearly this season was a bit of a letdown for them. But Steve Yzerman, I think he knows how to build hockey teams. You just want to believe that he's not going to come here and fail.
Yeah, Steve Yzerman has been part of 62-win teams and have had disappointing playoff runs. It's kind of fascinating that not only with Tampa Bay, but the Red Wings also had an epic season, and they failed to deliver. I believe it was a couple years before they won the Stanley Cup when they were eliminated by the Colorado Avalanche when they were the President Cup winner. They had a bunch of points, and it didn't come through. And I think Tampa Bay set up. If they can just retool a little bit, add a couple more pieces, they're right there. They'll be back. They'll be at top of the Eastern Conference. And
Tampa Bay will be there next year.
Yeah.
They don't need to retool. They have all the tools.
I think they need
if anything, the Blue Jackets were the team that, like, they were all in it for this year. And, like, you saw at the trade deadline, like, they had a bunch of rental players. But, I mean, maybe with their goalkeeping, but Tampa Bay is going to be a solid team. They don't have to do much.
Yeah, they're going to be a solid team, no doubt about it. And the fascinating part was, yes, I think that Steve Yzerman handled himself well. Obviously, he knows the job. He knows what to say. But I found it fascinating that the tone on our Twitter page and also kind of in the presser, too, was not only a celebration that Steve Yzerman was hired, but kind of a celebration that Ken Holland was gone. And he was not asked a single question. Chris Ilitch, and the tone early on was to obviously really show respect for Ken Holland and highlighting everything that he's done. Everybody's definitely showing the proper respect for Ken Holland. But I found it fascinating with the fans is they were equally willing to trash Ken Holland as well as celebrate Steve.
Count me in that number, because that was the first thing I texted you. I said, "Why is Ken Holland still here?"
What's the fairest way you evaluate Ken Holland? Do you give him as equal parts credit for the cups that he was part of, the three where he was the general manager, and his long-standing history as a scout, as somebody, deep within the organization that's been influential? Or do you say, you know what, as much success that he brought the Wings, he's also damaged them and set them back maybe even a decade because of the contracts that he gave, that when the time came to evolve as a general manager, when it was a salary cap era, he just did not make moves enough, and he made a really significant amount of bad contracts and moves that were in the draft maybe not the right ones. Do you also say to yourself, you know what, the blame that he gets should be more because you got to do more work when there's a salary cap? It really highlights your skills or lack thereof if you don't do well.
Yeah, I give him credit for the cups and being able to pull the trigger on some huge moves. That 2002 Cup where we just had like a Hall of Fame team. Yeah, the salary cap was very flimsy, and you could pretty much do whatever you wanted at that time. It was a different age back then. They didn't have recruiting teams in the European and in Russia as much as they do now, especially with the growth of social media and everything. I think the Wings were like the cutting edge, going over there and recruiting. So I think that was when we recruited Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg, because those guys weren't first overall picks. Those are guys that we found. So I give him credit for he was there and he helped the team, but he didn't evolve. He just really didn't evolve. And I always like to go back to this quote, and I'm sure it was somewhere else, but I always remember it from The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. And that's really what I feel like Ken Holland is that he was here for an amazing run of Detroit Red Wing hockey. He stayed way too long and made way too many bad contract moves, just not knowing what to do. If the coach isn't Scotty Bowman or Mike Babcock, I think it's just, it's a sour taste in my mouth. And I have to say that it's got this new position he's in. It's just got to be a placeholder. I mean, he's gonna be gone in a couple years.
Yeah, I just hope that he does stay a couple years and does kind of take advantage of maybe a year of just kind of advising and taking a lesser role. But yeah, he seems like he wants to be a general manager. And how are you going to turn down Edmonton? Or if there's a job opening that comes around, maybe even Tampa Bay, he could go down there and take care of business. If next season they don't succeed and they fire their general manager, he's probably a leading candidate there. So it's a fast.
He's been tied to that new franchise too in Seattle.
Yep, he's been tied. He'll be tied everywhere. I mean, everyone values 22 years experience, cups, and things like that. He'll get that offer. It's just going to be, are you willing to take it, and do you want to see this new challenge through with Steve Yzerman? It's going to be fascinating, but I just think that right now, the Red Wings, next year, probably not going to make the playoffs, but I do think they might be in the 70 to 80-point range. They'll be better. I think that you'll see Dylan Larkin, Athanasiou, Anthony Mantha. You might see Philippe Zadina up here a little bit longer and contributing, so it's obviously they're going to have to improve defense, and they're going to maybe have to look at a philosophy change and maybe have to seriously look at a philosophy change outside of this dump and chase because it didn't really result in significant goal production this season. So I'm fascinated. I'm now more curious. I think we'll be talking Red Wing hockey more than the 3 segments I think we talked in the entire season this last year. It's an exciting time. I think Steve Yzerman will at least give the Wings a chance. Will he win a cup in the next 5 years? Probably not, but I do think years 5, 6, 7, 8, if he's allowed to do the job, I think he'll put this team in the playoffs and maybe on the verge of some deep runs where we can get back to being the franchise that we all grew up watching, the team that was perennially in the playoffs, had a chance to win, and electrified their home arena, their home fans in a way that was second to none. And I think Little Caesars Arena deserves some great hockey memories. Haven't been too many, and the attendance has been scarce, and there's been a downturn for the Red Wings. And I think that Steve Yzerman will bring all the excitement. He'll do the job, and he'll do it with class and grace, and he'll do a great job. So now, when you turn your attention to the Pistons, I just want to have from you a parting shot. What are your thoughts on the Pistons? Obviously, by the time this comes out, the Pistons likely will be swept, probably another double-digit loss. After Game 3, obviously it was a big letdown for all the fans. All the fanboys went out there and cheered and jumped around and got excited. They got hyped, which was great. I thought it was great to see and be a part of. But in the end, I'm a guy that says, show me on the court. All in all, when your superstar Blake Griffin drops 27 points and you still get whooped by more than 15, it's an embarrassment. And that series didn't need to happen. I mean, for those that say it's a learning experience, okay, if you want to have a playoff series so that one guy, Luke Kennard, can get some experience. The rest of the guys probably won't be here. Blake Griffin, maybe, okay, he'll be here. Luke Kennard, that's about it. So all that for the experience of Luke Kennard, I just think that in the end, the Pistons hurt themselves mightily by being the 8th seed, getting their asses kicked. I mean, it's unheard of for a team to be a double-digit favorite and to cover all 3 of the first games there, and to look like that the Pistons didn't even belong. And then the other talk has been about Andre Drummond. I mean, I just think that our assessment's been fair. He's not a guy that here in Detroit's going to do anything, and I think the fans had a right to boo. So for me, I was greatly disappointed that they lost. It was expected, so it didn't hurt as much. The frustration comes in knowing that, for me, the frustration lies in you never had a chance to compete. You never, once the series was announced, Pistons-Bucks, there was 0.00000 belief that the Pistons could even compete, and that's a damn shame.
Absolutely. It sucks because you want them to succeed, and yeah, they can clean up against the bottom dwellers of the NBA, but man, Blake Griffin needs some help. Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson, they're
not
good enough
it, right?
No, they're not it, and they need something else. Maybe I don't know. I hate to single him out, but I mean, we gotta get rid of Drummond, man. We gotta try and move him somewhere, or just dump him, because he is not it. His playing style in the NBA, I just feel like it doesn't work. Don't give me that he gets you 20 rebounds a game. I do not care. I need something more. I need somebody to actually be able to score and do more than get a bunch of goddamn rebounds.
Exactly. Lead the team. When your guy, Blake Griffin, is hobbling and has had 10 days off because of an injury, he needs somebody to pick him up. You would think that you'd have your best performance, your absolute single greatest performance, 35 points, 25 rebounds, and if you go down with a 2-point loss, so be it. But, in front of your fans, Jason, the house was packed. There was not a spot to move your elbow. Everybody was excited. And when they got off to that early, decent start versus the Bucks, LCA was rocking. It was almost as loud as Michigan State Oakland when they played at LCA, which was, at that time, the highest attended game ever at LCA, and it was loud. There was atmosphere. There was a vibe, and it was there. The Piston fans showed out, and by the end of the game, it was everybody yelling and screaming about Andre. They were like, what's going on here? They could tell that he wasn't trying or that he wasn't performing at the level that a guy making over $20 million has to have when the lights are on. That's what it is that, obviously, yes, the money plays a part in it. You're paying him to be a leader. You're paying him to step it up. You're not paying him to be just one of the guys. So a guy like that, whether he'll have success with the Pistons or not, I just think that, yes, the Pistons need a culture change, and it starts with brooming out the old players, the old guard that none of the fans really want. Just a small handful definitely respect Andre Drummond. We all want him gone. We all think that, he's not part of the team. He's not part of what the fabric and the makeup of what we want for our basketball team, which is hard-nosed, game in, game out, show us what you got. And when the bright lights are on, Chauncey Billups' name was Mr. Big Shot. And those shots happened in the biggest moments. He stepped his game up at a time when nobody believed that he could do it. And that's what we're looking for here. And Andre Drummond, yeah, he's not a bum. He's not like an absolute waste. But in totality, when you grade out what he brings to the table, everybody in Detroit is ready to move on. Him, Reggie Jackson, and everybody else, they're going to do it. They're going to obviously let go of a lot of guys probably in the next 2 off seasons. It's going to be interesting to see how they replace it. But this season was, best way to describe it. It ended in disaster. Blake Griffin, a lot more question marks are going to arise with his injury situation, and can he be a guy that you can count on late in the season? Can you count on him to be healthy when the time is for the playoffs to start and when you absolutely need him? It's a tough time to be a fan of the Pistons because, like everybody says and how everybody's viewing it, they're on a road to nowhere at this point in time.
Yeah, if they really want to actually try to compete, they need to get another superstar, And I know we have zero chance of this, but throw your hat into the Klay Thompson ring, man.
Yeah, I should have said, yeah, exactly.
That would be a perfect player to try and go out and get there and pair with Blake Griffin. That would be the kind of guy that you'd want to see on the Pistons. You need a shooter. You need somebody who can put up the points when Blake Griffin can't go night in, night out.
Exactly. And look, if there's a center out there that you can get for $4 million like Brook Lopez, go get him. I mean, that guy took Andre Drummond's best skills and used them against him. Andre Drummond is irrelevant on offense. So I think that if you can get a center cheaper that can be a little bit more versatile, then so be it. I just think that with
get a cheaper center and then upgrade other places.
Yes.
I don't need Langston Galloway jacking up bricks all game long.
Oh my God, Jason. And we'll end on that note. Langston Galloway. Oh my God. The one bright spot is Luke Kennard seems like, okay, he could be a serviceable player off the bench if you surround him with a veteran leader, a guy that can also take the pressure off of him. I think he won't be obviously a fan favorite because of who was drafted after him and what we could have had, but I think he won't be a bust. I think he'll produce and maybe get you something back in return, maybe even a first rounder in a year or two if he does highlight his skills.
Absolutely. It's definitely a bummer.
All right, Jason. Thank you so much. You can follow Jason on Twitter at Jarvie the King. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Join the Flick community. Join Flick via the invite link on our platform. It's a great time to be part of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We're covering sports. We're doing daily podcasts. We're having a good time with it. And this week's a big week. NFL draft. Jason and I hopefully will be back next week. Break it all down, baby. And definitely on draft night, follow the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, the best place to get live fan reactions and the best spot to interact with those in the Metro Detroit community. I appreciate Jason's time. I always enjoy the conversation. Breaking down Detroit sports with my bud. Thanks, Jason. We'll talk soon.
Later, man.
You've just downloaded the latest edition of the Motor City Sports Rant.
Okay, nice, idiot. You. Bye-bye.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right, Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.